During dinner, my family labeled me a letdown. You'll never make anything of yourself. I stayed calm and walked out. They didn't realize I'd signed a $3 million book deal that morning. 2 months later, Dad's friend showed him a local. The reservation was set for 7, but I wandered in at 6:58, giving myself exactly 2 minutes to figure out whether I was actually prepared to sit across from my father and listen to him outline all the ways he believed I'd wrecked my life. Spoiler, I wasn't prepared at all, but I still showed up because my mom had called 3 times that week, each message sounding more panicked than the last, until her final one just said, "Please come. Your brother will be there. We miss you." Which, in my family's language, meant come sit through a full family evaluation session in a fancy restaurant where yelling would be considered rude. The place was one of those restaurants trying a little too hard to look upscale, all dark wood, low lighting, and servers who glide around like they rehearsed their steps. My dad, now called Frank, was already seated, studying the wine list like it was a stock report he personally needed to interpret for the nation. My mom, let's call her Linda, sat beside him, smoothing her napkin over and over like if she kept at it, it might magically turn into something that made her less anxious. Across from them was my brother, now named Mark, glued to his phone and probably checking stocks or fantasy football or whatever stable, put-together people do while waiting for dinner. I was 32 years old and still felt like I was walking straight into the principal's office. "There he is," Frank said without lifting his eyes from the wine list. "The artist." He said it the same way someone might say the culprit or the infection, with that special tone that makes a single word feel like a judgment. "Hey, Dad," I said as I sat down. "Good to see you." "Is it?" he asked. "Because it doesn't seem like seeing us is a big priority for you lately. When's the last time you came to Sunday dinner?" "Before tonight, I mean." "I've been busy with what?" Linda cut in, using that voice that pretends to be curious but is really just an invitation to step into a trap. "With your writing?" And there it was. Writing. The simple word that made my whole family decide I'd chosen disaster. "Yes," I said. "With my writing." Mark finally looked up. "Still haven't published anything, right? Just living off savings and whatever freelance scraps you pick up?" He framed it like a question, but we both knew he meant it as a jab. "That's not exactly true," I said slowly. "Which part?" Frank asked, lowering the wine list and finally meeting my eyes. "The part where you quit your job? Or the part where you've spent 2 years in that same apartment insisting you're writing a novel no one will ever read?" Something hot twisted in my chest. "I quit because I wasn't happy," I said. "I didn't want to waste 40 hours a week being miserable." "Nobody's happy at work," Mark said. "That's why it's called work." "That's not true," I shot back. "Some people find jobs they actually care about. By getting MBAs and going into finance," Frank said. "Not by sitting in coffee shops tapping on a laptop and hoping someone magically wants to publish your thoughts." Linda made a noise that landed somewhere between sympathy and agreement. "I've taken this seriously," I said. "I have a plan. I'm working towards something." "For 2 years?" Frank asked. "How long do you expect us to sit by while you throw away everything you could have been?" "I'm not throwing anything away. You're throwing away your education, your time, your chances." He leaned toward me. "Do you realize how many people would kill for the degree you have? For the connections you were handed? And you're tossing them aside to chase a pipe dream." I stayed quiet. Nothing I could say would move him even an inch. He'd made up his mind about me long before this dinner. "Your brother's making 6 figures, Frank went on. "He's stable. He's got direction. And you? What do you have? A cramped apartment you barely cover and a fantasy that's never going to solidify." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But at least it's mine. At least I'm aiming at something that actually matters to me instead of settling for whatever someone else decides is acceptable." Frank's face went bright red, like his blood pressure had punched a hole in the ceiling. "That's called being ungrateful," he said, getting louder. "That's called not understanding how the real world works." "I understand perfectly," I said. "The real world expects me to be miserable. I'm choosing not to be." "You're choosing to be a disappointment," he said. "To this family. To yourself. To everyone who believed you'd do something worthwhile." The silence that followed felt like something inside the room cracked. Linda looked away. Mark glanced back at his phone. A waiter walked up to take drink orders, sensed the tension, and immediately backed off. "Here's your real problem," Frank said. "You've never understood that life isn't about dreams. It's about being practical. It's about choosing stability. It's about responsibility." I am being responsible, I told him. No, he said. You're being selfish. You're being unrealistic. You're being the kind of person who won't become anything because you're lost in fantasies. He said it like he was stamping a file closed. I picked up my napkin, set it on my lap, then stood. I'm going to head out. Sit down, he ordered. We just got here. There's really no point, I said. You already know exactly who you think I am, and nothing I say will budge that. Don't be dramatic, Linda said. Let's order. We can talk this out calmly. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You think I'm a failure. You think I'm wasting my life. You think I'll never accomplish anything. I heard you. I get it. But I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about who I am. Because you're not interested in being wrong. That's not fair, my mom said. It's absolutely fair, I told her. It's completely fair. Because you're not actually upset that I've been unhappy. You're upset that I'm not sticking to the script you laid out for me years ago. Then I looked at Frank. I came tonight because Mom asked me to, because some part of me still thought maybe you'd want to know who I really am instead of just judging me from a distance. But you don't. You're only here to confirm that I'm still a disappointment in your eyes. Well, you're nailing that, he said. I gave a small nod, pushed my chair in, walked straight out of the restaurant, and didn't look back once. That morning, the same morning as the dinner, I'd signed a book deal for $3 million. I know that sounds wild, like something I'm exaggerating for dramatic effect, but it's the truth. I'd woken up at 6 to an email from my agent, sent at 5:47 because she apparently doesn't require sleep. The subject line just said, they matched. $3 million. You did it. I must have read that email 17 times before the reality of the words actually clicked in my brain. $3 million. For the novel I'd been writing in that coffee shop while my family rolled their eyes. The novel I'd started 2 years earlier. The one Frank insisted no one would ever read. The one Mark treated like a pointless hobby. Someone wanted it. Actually, several someones wanted it. There'd been a bidding war. Publishers fighting over it like it was the most important manuscript they'd ever laid eyes on. My agent handled the negotiating. There were foreign rights offers. There was already a film option floating around. The whole thing had the kind of momentum that only shows up when something is genuinely, undeniably good. I called my agent right away. Please tell me you're actually seeing this, she said, and I could practically hear her grinning into the phone. I'm seeing it, I told her. You're not hallucinating? You're not having a breakdown? I'm extremely awake. Then congratulations, she said. You're officially a published author with a 7-figure deal. You're going to do book tours, interviews. Your face is going to be in magazines. The story you've been telling people for 2 years, the one about the guy who gave up everything to chase a dream. That's going to be your actual life now. After we hung up, I just sat there in my apartment for 3 straight hours, staring at the wall and trying to absorb the fact that my life had shifted that dramatically overnight. $3 million. The amount Frank swore I'd never earn doing this. The amount he'd call impossible. My mom had asked me to come to dinner. She wanted us to reconnect, to let the family support me, which basically meant letting them take another swing at my decisions. And I'd said yes because there was still some small part of me that wished they'd believe in me, that hoped they'd see something worthwhile in what I was doing. But when I walked out of that restaurant, something clicked. I didn't need them to believe in me anymore. I finally believed in myself enough for all of us. I'd been quiet all night. I hadn't told them about the deal. I hadn't mentioned that everything they'd said was wrong, that I was going to be more than fine, that the thing they mocked was about to become the very thing that proved them wrong forever. I just left. And honestly, that felt better than rubbing the truth in their faces ever would have. Because the success wasn't something they earned the right to see. It was something I got to keep for myself. I didn't tell anyone about the deal. Not my mom. Not my closest friend. Not even my therapist. And I literally pay her to listen to the stuff I can't process alone. I locked the news inside me. It felt fragile, almost sacred, like saying it out loud too soon would jinx it somehow. So I kept living exactly the way I had been. I sat in coffee shops. I worked through edits. I met with my agent about marketing strategies, tour plans, interviews. All the little details that suddenly mattered now that a publisher had invested $3 million into my future. The book came out 3 months later. Inheritance of Silence. That was the title. It followed a woman who spent her whole life chasing her family's approval, only to realize she never needed it in the first place. It was technically fiction, but every page had pieces of my life woven into it. Every character carried someone I'd known or someone I'd been. The reviews started rolling in almost immediately. A stunning debut that lays bare the quiet ache of conditional love. Raw, unflinching, unforgettable. The kind of book readers will talk about for decades. It started climbing charts, first local lists, then national ones. International deals began popping up. Someone mentioned a potential Netflix adaptation. My publicist began lining up interviews. NPR wanted me. The New York Times gave me a full feature. And my family still had no idea. Not because I was deliberately keeping them in the dark, but because I'd made a choice. If they didn't care to know me when I was struggling, they didn't get to claim me when I succeeded. But my dad's friend Jerry did read the paper. Jerry was the kind of man who'd known Frank for decades, the golf and holidays sort of friend who still tells the same stories he told in the early 90s. He was at his office one morning, probably messing around on his computer looking up golf gear, when his wife called and said, "Honey, you need to read this article." It was in the local paper, the section they dedicate to standout residents. A full-page feature about me. About my journey out of corporate life, into writing, and toward a debut novel that the journalist said was destined to become a modern classic. There was a picture of me, a quote about choosing authenticity over security, even a paragraph about how my family never really understood my choices, but I stayed committed anyway. Jerry read it from top to bottom. Then he called my father. I never found out exactly what Jerry told him. All I ever got was the version my mom later repeated, filtered through her own shock and confusion. She said Jerry had called and said something like, "Hey, did you know your kid's some kind of well-known author now? There's a huge article about him in the paper. Says he landed a big book deal." According to her, Frank had gone pale, truly pale, the kind of pale you see when the entire world tilts under someone's feet. He'd asked Jerry to send the link, read the article, then apparently sat alone in his office for 10 straight minutes without speaking. After that, he'd called Linda. "Did you know about this?" He'd asked. "About what?" She'd said. "About our son being a published author. About some giant book deal. About him being in the newspaper." She told me there'd been one of those long, cold silences afterward, the kind where she instantly understood he wasn't confused or proud or anything hopeful. He was angry. "I think he published something," she'd finally said, choosing her words carefully. "He published something?" Frank had repeated. "He didn't publish something. He's got a multi-million-dollar deal, his face is in the paper, and somehow his own family is in the dark." 2 days later, I got the call. I was sitting in a coffee shop, where else, scribbling notes for my publicist about upcoming interviews, when Linda's name flashed across my screen. "Your father wants you to call him," she said. "Why?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. "He saw the article," she said quietly. "In the paper." "Okay," I said. "He's very upset that you didn't tell us." I set my coffee down. Is he upset that I published a book? Or is he upset that he found out about it from Jerry instead of me? "I don't think that's the important distinction right now," she said. "He's your father. He should have known. You all should have known." "Why?" I asked. "So you could congratulate me? Or so you could take another shot at telling me I'd made a terrible choice?" "That's not fair," she said. "It's completely fair." At dinner, Dad spent 20 minutes explaining why I'd never amount to anything. He told me I was wasting my life, wasting my time, that nobody would ever want to read what I wrote. So forgive me for not sprinting to tell him that I just signed a deal that proves him wrong. "This isn't about who's right or wrong," she insisted. "This is about family." "It's exactly about right and wrong," I said. "It's about him deciding who I was and what I could accomplish, and then getting mad when reality didn't match the version of me he'd already chosen to believe." "He wants to apologize," my mom said softly. I didn't respond. "He's sorry for what he said at dinner. He knows now that you were serious, that you knew what you were doing. He's sorry because I made money," I said. "Not because he misjudged me. Because now it's profitable enough that he can't ignore it." "That's not true," she said. "It's exactly true. If the book had bombed, if I'd kept struggling, if everything had fallen apart, he'd still think I was a disappointment. The only thing that changed his opinion was the dollar signs and the newspaper headline." "I think you're being unfair," she said. "I think I'm being honest. And those aren't the same thing." She exhaled in that tired way she does. "Your father's not a bad man." "I know he's not," I said. "But he's a man who judges anyone who chooses a different path than he would. And he wasn't remotely interested in understanding me until it turned into something he could brag about." The next day, Frank called me himself. I almost let it ring out. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Your mother says you're upset with me," he said. "I'm not upset," I told him. "I'm just not interested in a relationship that only exists when I'm successful." "That's not what this is," he said. "Isn't it?" At dinner, I was a disappointment. Someone wasting his life, someone with no future. But then the paper says I'm a published author with a big deal, and suddenly you want to apologize? "I was wrong," he said. "I was wrong about you. I should have believed in you." "You should have believed in me before the book deal," I said. "You should have believed in me when I was in that coffee shop wondering if anyone would ever care about what I was writing. That's when it mattered. That's when I needed it." "I know," he said quietly. "But you didn't," I said. "You told me I was selfish. You told me I was throwing my life away. You told me I'd never amount to anything." "I was scared," he said, and I froze because that was real. Maybe the first real thing he'd said to me in a long time. "Scared of what?" I asked. "Scared you were making a mistake. Scared you'd regret it. Scared I'd have to watch my son ruin his future," he said. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. "But you didn't ruin anything," he continued. "You built something real. You did exactly what you set out to do. And I wasn't there for any of it. I wanted to stay mad. It would have been so much easier. But what I heard wasn't pride or performance. It was regret. Deep, honest regret. I needed you to believe in me," I said. "Even when I didn't believe in myself. That's what family is supposed to do." "I know," he said, "and I didn't. I failed. I'm sorry. I'm not interested in apologies," I told him. "I'm interested in whether you can actually change. Whether you can see me as someone capable of making good choices, even when they aren't the choices you'd make." "I can try," he said. "That's all I'm asking," I said. "Not for you to have always believed in me, just for you to believe in me now. And going forward." He paused long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "I'm proud of you," he finally said. "I know I should have said it at dinner. I should have said it 2 years ago when you chose this path. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of what you've done." And he said he was sorry he hadn't been there to witness any of it, and something shifted in my chest at those words. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it felt like the start of something that might someday become understanding. "Thank you," I said. "Can we have dinner?" he asked. "A real dinner. Not tense, not performative. Just dinner?" "Yeah," I said. "We can do that." 2 weeks later, my book hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and the first person I called was my father. "It's #1, I told him. "The book is #1. I could hear the smile in his voice when he said, "I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud of you." And for the first time, I actually believed him. The book tour kicked off in September, 30 cities in 40 days, hotel rooms that blended together, coffee that tasted like determination mixed with exhaustion, and crowds of people eager to tell me how the story had changed them. My publicist, Diana, the kind of person who seemed powered entirely by caffeine and sheer will, had me scheduled for every interview imaginable. Morning shows where the hosts asked the same questions with different inflections. Podcasts where people probed into whether my family understood the weight of the book. Virtual book clubs full of women discussing the ache of conditional love. One interviewer, with makeup so surgically precise it looked engineered, asked, "Your family sees all this, right? They know the book is about them." "I think they know now," I said. "Probably they realized it the moment they read it." "Have they reached out? Are they mortified?" "Some of them are processing," I said. "Some of them are learning truths about themselves they didn't want to confront." What I didn't add was that Mark had apparently hurled the book across the room when he recognized himself in one of the characters. That my mother had called me sobbing after the chapter about feeling unseen. That my father had purchased 50 copies to hand out to coworkers like business cards. The thing about writing a book about your family is that you don't get to undo it. Every flaw, every kindness, every bruise, it's all trapped in print forever. I hit 17 cities in the first stretch. Seattle was packed. San Francisco was emotional, including a woman who cried during Q&A because she said my story gave her the courage to leave her own family. Los Angeles was surreal. A film producer attended, and by the next morning my agent was juggling calls about screen rights. But Chicago was the night everything shifted. The event was held in a massive downtown bookstore, and the place overflowed. People were pressed into aisles and corners. Diana was practically vibrating with pride. I stood under bright lights that felt like they were slow roasting my brain, staring out at hundreds of faces, all there to hear about my family's disappointment and my refusal to cave to it. And then, in the third row, I saw them. My father. my mother, Mark, my Aunt Carol, practically my whole extended family, lined up shoulder to shoulder, watching me talk about the story they had helped shape. I nearly lost my train of thought. This is surreal, I said, honestly stunned. My family is here, in the audience, watching me talk about my family. This is either deeply healing or incredibly traumatic, and I don't know which yet. People laughed. My dad actually smiled. Like he was proud I'd noticed him. During the Q&A, someone asked if my family relationships had changed since the book came out. I looked at them, my father, my mother, my brother. Some of them, I said. My dad and I have been working on things. He underestimated me, and I got defensive. Now we're trying to land somewhere in the middle, where I don't need constant proof he believes in me, and he doesn't feel like he has to apologize for being human. That sounds healthy, the person said. It's progress, I answered. I'm learning relationships aren't about winning. They're about whether people keep showing up after the hurt. Afterward, they waited outside the bookstore for me. My dad pulled me into a real hug, not the stiff, obligatory kind families give at holiday dinners, but the solid kind that says something unspoken. That was incredible, he said. I was so proud watching you up there. I kept thinking, that's my son. My son wrote that. Thanks for coming, I said. I wasn't expecting everyone. Your mother wanted to, he said. She read the book and realized how much of it was about her. About how invisible you felt. She wanted to see you being seen. My mother was crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. I'm sorry, she said. For all of it. For not paying attention. For believing whatever your father believed. For not being there when you needed me. I hugged her, and she held on like she was trying to cram 2 years of regret into one embrace. Then Mark stepped forward, awkward in that way people get when emotions aren't their native language. I read the book, he said. The part about me judging you for not having a stable career, it hit different when I realized you're making more money than I am. That's not the point, I said. I know, he replied. The point is I should have respected your choices instead of assuming you were wasting your life. I was wrong. He stuck out his hand like we were about to finalize a business deal. I stared at it for a second, then pulled him into a hug instead. We're family, I said. Hugs are acceptable. The book tour kept rolling on, but something in the air felt different. My family started showing up to more events, 3 of them, actually, sitting quietly in the crowd while I talked about the very things we'd spent years avoiding. They read the book, really read it, and began having real conversations with me about the parts that hurt and the parts that felt true. My mom began seeing a therapist to face the guilt she'd carried for not supporting me. My dad started reading books about how to be a better parent. It didn't magically fix everything, but it felt like the closest thing to healing we'd ever had. In Denver, during a local TV interview, the host asked if I was planning on writing a second book. I'm not sure yet, I said. This one took everything out of me. I need to actually live a bit before I have more to say. What about writing about your family's reconciliation? She suggested. That's a pretty great story too. Maybe, I said, but I think that story isn't done yet. We're still in the thick of it. She frowned. What do you mean? You reconciled at your Chicago event. Reconciliation isn't a single moment, I said. It's a whole process. My family didn't understand me for years. Now they're trying. But I still have to forgive them for those years, and they still have to forgive me for writing the truth about the ways they failed. That doesn't happen in an afternoon. By the end of the tour in December, the book had sold more than 2 million copies. It ended the year as the #1 fiction title, had been optioned for a TV series, and got me a nomination for a major literary award. Publishers were already circling for whatever I wrote next. And my family. We weren't suddenly perfect or transformed into a greeting card version of support, but we were real, honest, finally getting to know who each of us actually was. On the last day of the tour, my dad called me. I'm reading the book again, he said. Second time through. Why? I asked. Because the first time, I was too busy being defensive, too busy seeing myself in the parts one didn't like. But now I'm reading the whole thing, and I see me in the good parts too. I see the dad who wanted to protect his son, even if he completely botched the execution. You were trying to protect me, I said. You were just putting me in a box I didn't fit in. I see that now, he said. I'm sorry it took a $3 million book deal for me to understand it. I'm not sorry, I said, because if the deal had come first, I wouldn't have had anything real to write about. The struggle mattered. The doubt mattered. The distance mattered. For the book? He asked. For everything, I said. For me to become someone I respect. For you to become someone I can forgive. He paused. I love you, he said. Not as a father proud of some big achievement. I love you as someone who respects the person you became. I love you too, I said. Even when I'm angry at you. Especially then, he said. Because that's when it's real. A year after the tour, my alma mater invited me to speak. Not for a career panel, but as a featured guest in their annual lecture series. They flew me out, put me in a nice hotel, and told me I could speak about anything I wanted. I chose to talk about failure. The specific kind of failure that hits hardest when the people you love don't believe in you. And how that kind of failure can become the one that teaches you how to believe in yourself. My entire family came. All of them. My dad sat in the front row taking notes like he was prepping for a final exam. My mom sat beside him with a look that mixed pride and guilt in equal measure. Mark showed up with his wife and kids. Cousins I hadn't seen in ages. Aunt Carol, who had apparently forced her entire book club to read my novel. I stood on that stage, the same one where I'd once given presentations about topics I didn't care about, and I talked about that dinner where my dad told me I'd never amount to anything. He was wrong, I said, but not because he was cruel or clueless. He was wrong because he was scared. He was terrified I'd make a choice that would ruin my life. And instead of saying that out loud, instead of showing vulnerability, he judged me. I paused, and I spent 2 years punishing him for that. I spent 2 years not telling him about the book deal, not letting him be part of my success, not giving him the chance to see me become who I said I would become. I thought I was proving a point, but all I was doing was holding on to anger. My dad was crying, real tears rolling down his face. And here's what I learned, I said. Punishing someone doesn't heal anything. Proving someone wrong doesn't heal anything. The only thing that starts to fix anything at all is forgiveness. Not erasing what they did, but choosing to forgive them for being human. The audience gave a standing ovation. The university offered me a visiting professorship. My agent called with news that the film adaptation was suddenly being fast-tracked. But none of that was the important part. After the speech, my family took me to dinner at a restaurant my dad picked. Not a flashy place trying to impress anyone. Just somewhere warm where people could eat and talk. We sat together around the table with no judgment, no tension, just actual conversation. My dad told a story about reading my book aloud to his colleagues and how they saw themselves in the characters. My mom talked about how reading the book made her finally understand the pain she'd caused by not paying attention. Mark mentioned that his kids had read parts of it, age-appropriate parts, and how it made them think harder about their own choices. You changed things, Mark said, by refusing to accept the version of you we tried to force on you. You changed how all of us think about ourselves, too. That's generous, I said. It's true, my father replied. I was already lining up plans to push Mark toward finance and your cousin toward law school. But after reading your book, after seeing what happens when people force themselves into lives they don't want, I stopped. I started asking people what they wanted instead of telling them what they should do. We finished dinner and headed out into the cool night. As we walked to the car, my dad rested his hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, he said. I'm sorry I couldn't just believe in you from the beginning. I'm sorry I made you earn it, I said. I could have told you about the book deal. I could have let you be proud without making you fight your way back in. We both learned something, he said. Yeah, I said. We learned that family is messy and complicated and still worth showing up for, even when it's hard. 6 months later, my second book was released. It wasn't about my family at all. Completely different people, completely different problems, but I dedicated it to my dad. Just one simple line. For someone who learned to believe. He called right after he read it. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, I told him. But you did learn to believe. Not just in me. Your whole idea of what makes someone's choices valid changed. That's still pretty generous of you, he said. No, I said. It's honest. And honesty is better than generosity. 2 years after that dinner where he told me I'd never amount to anything, I sat down for an interview with a magazine. They asked all the usual questions. Where I grew up, how I got into writing, what my first book meant to me. Then they asked what I wished I could tell my younger self. I thought of that person sitting in a coffee shop, convinced no one wanted to hear what he had to say. That guy who walked out of a restaurant because his dad couldn't see his worth. I wish I could tell him that his father was going to come around, I said. That it would take longer than he wanted and be harder than it should have been, but it would happen. And when it did, it would be worth everything. Do you think your father reads what you write now? The interviewer asked. Obsessively, I said. He's my biggest fan. That must feel good, she said. It does, I answered, but not in the way I used to imagine. I thought his approval would feel like winning, like I'd finally beaten something. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like peace. Like we stopped being opponents and started being a family again. I'm 34 now. My books are published in 23 countries. I teach at 2 universities. My life looks nothing like what I pictured when I was 29 and scared out of my mind, convinced I was ruining everything. My dad and I have dinner once a month. We talk about books, family, the things we wish we'd learned sooner. He reads more now. He thinks differently about success. When he tells people about his son, the author, it's not in that braggy way. It's in that warm, proud way that comes from actually knowing and respecting someone. My mother volunteers at a bookstore. She leads book clubs. She talks to parents about why supporting their kids' dreams matters. Mark has stopped steering his children toward predetermined careers. He asks what they want instead. My family didn't transform into some perfect version of itself. They're still complicated. They still get things wrong. But they changed enough. And I changed too. I stopped needing them to validate my choices. I stopped punishing them for not believing in me. I stopped making my success into something meant to prove them wrong and started making it something meant to prove something to myself. That's what matters. Not that my father apologized. Not that my family finally recognizes my worth. What matters is that I learned to recognize my own worth first and then chose whether I wanted to let them be part of it. Some people never get that far. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for someone else to tell them they matter. I'm just grateful I didn't spend more time doing that. I'm grateful I learned early that the only approval that really counts is the one you give yourself.